Okay. Well, good evening and welcome to our very first kickoff for our HusKAL. This is our How to Strand class for our project. And as you know, we have designed this to have 3 different projects that you will be working on, and they all have some stranded knitting in it. And we start with our cowl. This is your first project, so you will have hopefully done your ribbing, and then we'll get started tonight. I'm going to do some teaching, and then when we're done, we'll turn the recording off, and then we'll sit and work a little bit and allow you to ask some questions and just kind of practice it yourself. But one of the great things about stranded knitting is that you can do some really beautiful, what would be called color work. In your handouts, in your email that you got, and if you didn't get one, we'll get your name at the end so that we can send this to you. And that's for those that are participating. If you're watching it later, you're probably going to be watching it when it's close to when you would have gotten the patterns. But I have included the How to Stranded Knitting handout in that material that talks about what stranded knitting is. Kind of fun to read it. I won't take time to go through it all, but there are things that we talk about with stranded knitting that are called floats, and the floats are what you see on the back of your work, like this. So even though I turn it around, kind of looks neat that way, doesn't it? I could about wear it that way. Floats are you're carrying yarn across the back. So you're usually knitting with 2 yarns when you're doing stranded knitting. 3, 4 yarns at a time, that's a whole different class. So 2 yarns at a time is what we'll be focusing on with that. One of the things we often talk about in stranded knitting is what we call yarn dominance. And yarn dominance, I'm sorry I don't have all samples here to show you, but yarn dominance would mean that the yarn that pops out at you. So for example, we might be doing this project and having a more intricate kind of design, maybe a holiday motif or something like that that would be showing in here. And we would really want that to pop out. Not that we don't want these to pop out, but the way this project was designed was for ease of knitting. It's a way to step into stranded knitting that's going to hopefully be comfortable for you. So you don't necessarily see, you do here in the middle when you get to week 2, but it's more of an equal. So the section we're starting with is 4 and 4, 4 and 4, 4 and 4. So there's not really dominance being. And again, if I had an example, I would show you, but you can read about yarn dominance. I think I'm hoping what will happen after working through all these projects is that you'll really gain a passion for stranded knitting. It's super, I find it super fun to do. I find it a challenge, which I like, but it's not so challenging that advanced beginner can't master it. And I guess what I would say to you is that it takes practice. And it takes practice to get better at it as you go. And again, that's why this project is going to be so fabulous for you. What we're going to talk about tonight is holding the yarn. So there's really kind of 3 ways to do it. You can hold it in your left hand. You can hold both of the yarns in your left hand. That would be if you're a continental knitter. Even if you're not a continental knitter, I have taught many people to do their stranded knitting the continental way because it allows you to really pick both of the yarns. And I'll show you that here in a minute. The other way that people often do stranded knitting is you hold 1 yarn in your left hand and 1 yarn in your right hand. And then you'll pick this one and you'll knit this one and you'll knit this one and you'll knit this one. And then the other way that it can be accomplished is you simply drop it and pick it up, drop it and pick it up, drop it and pick it up. And I'm going to show you all 3 of those. One of the things that you'll hear and talk about that is often talked about in stranded knitting is the floats and catching the floats. And so I took a class in Seattle, Washington with Mary J. Mucklestone, who is just a Fair Isle genius. She just does really intricate, beautiful, what you would call traditional Fair Isle color work that comes from the Shetland Islands. Very historic kind of knitting. And so I took a class with her because I really wanted to master it. And she was teaching and she was kind of the opinion, well, however you like to do it. And I'm like, well, I pulled her aside and said, I really want to know how you do it. And so what I learned is how Mary Jane teaches it in the left hand. And I don't think this project is a bad project to possibly try to do it that way. I have knitters that are throwers and they do their color work continental. Okay. And so one of the things that Mary Jane talks about is the floats and catching the floats. So some people catching the floats means you don't want floats that are so long that if you would put your hand through it, you would catch it. But this is a cowl. Don't put your earrings on before you put it on, you know. Now mittens, that's a little different story, but I don't believe in catching floats too much. I very rarely catch floats. And in fact, the only point that I will start to catch floats will be in when we do week 3. And that will be right in here where there's more than 8 stitches across. What I have found personally, and I've seen people that catch floats a lot, their work becomes very stiff. Okay. So I feel like it's better to let it flow. Just let it go. You know, if you're doing stranded knitting in a sock and you're putting your toes in, that might be a point where you would catch them more frequently, maybe every 5 stitches. But I do not catch floats unless I'm getting up into the 8 range. And we'll show you, I've got the video on how I do catch the floats that you can take a look at as well. And then the final thing before we look at our demonstration is your work's going to look kind of uneven. I've got my other cowl here. It won't look as nice as this piece looks. Blocking helps stranded knitting big time. Okay. But that being said, blocking will not block out stranded knitting that is too tight. So if there's probably a problem that happens most often with stranded knitting is people get it too tight, especially if you're a tight knitter. So one of the things that you could consider is going up 1 needle size or possibly even a 2nd needle size. So I would encourage you as you're working on this project, if you're feeling like you don't have any give at all, then stop, drop, take it back and go up a needle size. So that then you can see if you're keeping it loose. The final secret to keeping it loose is that after you've knit 3 or 4 stitches at a time, you want to open them up and slide them out. Open them up and slide them. Give them some breathing room so that those floats don't get too tight. What's in this picture is the illustration of how I tension my yarn between my fingers. I know there are those little feeder things that you can put on. I've tried them. I don't find them to be, I find them to be more of a hassle for me. That doesn't mean that they might not work really well for you. Should you want to try that. But I'd encourage you to try. We're going to look at 3 different techniques tonight. I'd encourage you to try them and see which one works for you and just explore as we go along. So I know you've got your pattern. One of the things I often don't like to do is give the pattern out because then you start working. So I'm going to encourage you to put your needles down and watch as we take a look at this because you're not going to get this video to look at later tonight. Okay. It'll take us a bit to process this, and then the rest of it will come on Friday. So we'll hope to get this class up tomorrow, but it could be Wednesday. So you need to really pay attention now, so that you can get a feel for what we're going to do. Donna, do we have any questions?
Nope, no questions.
Okay, we're going to go to screen share. And let's do that. Okay, here we go. I'm going to show you live doing it, but we're going to watch the videos first. So we'll watch a video first, and then I'll come back and I'll do some live demonstration as well. And then we'll get to knitting so that you can practice it, and I can be here for you. So I'm going to turn the phone, and these are the things we've all learned during the pandemic, how to do all of these things. So we're going to watch this one first. Get the volume.
4 red. Now I'm ready to do 4 white. I often get asked, well, how do you add a yarn in? Well, I just really put my needle in and pick up the yarn and go. I don't do anything fancy with the tail. This will be loose as you go along, and so you'll have to come back and snug it up, but I'm not going to worry about snugging it up for a while. And I'm just going to get these first 4 white stitches knit. When I made my first sample, my arrows went the wrong direction because I got kind of confused. So make sure that your arrows as we work are going to go to the left. Now I'm going to slip my marker. All right, so let's talk about stranded knitting. I like to have my stranded knitting. I'm a continental knitter, so I tension my yarn in my left hand. One of the things that I hear too is, well, if I don't knit a certain way, then I am inferior. And that's just not true at all. However you knit is great. There's no right or wrong. I'm going to show you several ways to do the stranded knitting. And I'm first going to show you how I do it with a continental knitting. And so with continental knitting, you tension your yarn in your left hand. And so instead of 1 yarn, I've got 2 yarns. And so I wrap those 2 yarns around my pinky. That's like my bobbin tension. It comes under my middle 2 fingers and over my index finger. So I'll do that again. So you wrap it around your pinky, and you have to scoop it towards you. So don't go like this. Scoop it towards you so it goes all the way around that pinky, under the 2 and over the 1. And then what I like to do is I like to put my middle finger between the 2 yarns like that. And then they both feed off the top of my index finger. And it's best if you can keep it about at this spot on your index finger. And then this continental knitting is sometimes what we call picking as well. And so now I will knit with 4 red, and I just simply go and pick that off my index finger. And then I switch to the 4 white. 1, 2, 3, 4. After you do your stranded knitting, it's important that you give everything a little bit of a stretch out, because we do not want these floats to get too tight. We don't want your project to get scrunchy. One of the things you'll notice in your stranded knitting is that maybe your stitches don't look as even as you might like them to look. That's okay. They will block out. This piece blocks out beautifully. So you don't need to worry too much. What's important, though, is paying attention to how tight your stitches might be. If your stitches are getting too tight with the stranded knitting, we might consider going up a needle size. Okay, I'm ready to move my marker over. Now I need to do 4 red and 4 white. And you can kind of see that my yarn drops off of my index finger. So I will drop. I like to keep my yarns to the left. So I've got them both over here. And I kind of pull the yarn out. Then I give it that tension, wrap it around. I learned this method several years ago from Mary Jane Mucklestone. And then I give it the finger, and then I tension it up and over the index finger like that, so that then I can go and pick them off. So I'm ready to pick off my red. Sometimes we talk about yarn dominance, which color stands out. This is a 4x4, and so we're not really going to be too concerned because everything is even. Slip your marker and continue on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I lost my white. Just go and pick it back up and grab your white. And then again, don't forget to give it a little stretch out so that the work doesn't get too tight.
Okay. One of the things that I didn't talk about is you see that the markers are in here. Markers are a must. They are a must, must, must. You need to put markers in. Look, I'm an experienced knitter and I use markers. We talk about this all the time. We all have a lot of knitting to do, and there's nothing worse than having to backtrack this because you didn't put your markers in, and you get to the end of the round and you're like, oh, I'm off by 1. And then guess where my mistake always is? It's right at the beginning. So if you'll do this and put your markers in, so kind of that first round, and this is an 8-stitch repeat. The other thing I did not talk about is how do you read a chart? So if you look at your chart there, you'll look at your chart and you will read a chart right to left, not how we would read a book, left to right. So that number 1 is your first stitch. And look, there's only 8. So what do you think you do after you've done 8? You repeat the 8 again and again. Now you can read a chart, or this is written out. So you don't have to follow the chart at all. You could go with the written directions. And in fact, the first one that I knit, I followed all the written directions. Now the second one that I'm knitting, I am following the chart. When you see the videos, our chart looks different. It's the same chart, but we kind of adjusted the colors because the problem, not the problem, but the challenge in color work is your eye looks at a dark color, and if you're knitting with a light color, it can be really hard to make that change in your head. And so we tried to make the chart that you got tonight and that you will get on Friday to be more eye friendly, I guess. So you read the chart right to left. You're going to repeat it. I don't quite know how many times you repeat it, but 8 stitches around. So you see that I have a marker with every 8 stitches. Seems like there was something else I wanted to tell you about the chart, but let's watch the next one. Now I'm going to show you how to strand knit with 2 different hands.
Now let's take a look at two-handed stranded knitting. That would be where you hold one color continental-wise and you throw with your right hand. And so you would still tension your yarn. This is a nice thing to practice. If you'd like to practice your continental with this. And so we would knit the 4 red, just like we would as a continental knitter. Then we would pick up and I have a tendency to tension kind of the same way, wrapped around the pinky and over. And then I'm going to knit with my 4 white as a wrap like that. Transfer, 4 red, And you can see that the white's just waiting for me to be used here. And then I'm going to wrap with the 4 white. And don't forget to give everything a stretch.
Now, I will tell you with that technique, and I'm going to do some live demonstration here in a minute. What tends to happen for me is that yarn that I'm knitting with out of my right hand gets short because you saw me tipping that needle up, and that's shortening the distance of that yarn, and it makes that yarn a little bit tighter. So you've got to be careful if you're going to do that. You don't even have to tension it with 2 fingers. You can just wrap it, wrap it, wrap it, wrap it, which we're going to look at next. And then I'll do some live demonstration for you.
Okay, there's one more way. It's English or throwing, and you have both of your yarns here in your right hand, and you would pick up. So now I need the red, so I'm going to pick up my red, and I'm going to wrap the yarn 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll drop the red, and I pick up the white, and I pick up the white from underneath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Give them a scooch, drop the white, and I'm going to pick up the red from underneath the white, and this closes the gap. So here's our 4 red. 1, 2, 3, 4. Drop the red. Sometimes you can move the balls around if you like. Pick up your white and knit with your white. 1, 2, 3, 4. Give your stitches a little space and continue on until you've worked around your round. And then you'll continue working until you've completed the second set of offset arrows with your accent color.
Okay. I'm going to do some live. This is like old COVID days where fortunately we have the camera. I used to hold it up to the thing like this and say, can you see it? Can you see it? It actually worked. We got it done, but I'm going to go to the camera and try to just give you some real time kind of tips. One of the things that is frustrating for stranded knitting is that the yarns get tangled up. And that's why I often do my stranded knitting at a desk or a table. I don't always just do it in my lounge chair because the yarns get all over, they run away, then they're all tangled up, and then I'm spending 15 minutes just getting untangled. So there is a bit of a system to it. And you know, those little snap bags that we sell, you can thread those yarns through the snaps, and then you can turn the yarn and turn the bags, and that helps as well. That's probably another class. But I'm gonna look more at the camera here so that I can show you. This is the sample that I'm doing, and you can see that the stitches aren't quite as nice and blocked out, but I do have my markers in. And now I'm going to show you that continental method here as well. So again, you wrap it, you tension it, and then you've got them both, but you have to, I call it, give it the finger, put the finger in the middle and make that yarn ride over your index finger. And I understand if you've never continental, this might be just really super frustrating for you. So don't worry about it. But I'm going to tell you that it really makes for a smooth stranded knitting. And this is the 4 red. Now I might be thinking about yarn dominance at this point. And if I wanted my yarn dominance, I'd say, well, maybe it's the gray. And then really the gray should be over here. If I were teaching you a true like holiday motif, we would want the color that's going to pop out to be closest to travel the shortest distance. But we're not really going to worry about that. What we want to do is we want to get the technique built. And so then I'm going to go and I'm going to grab the four gray. And see, I just go up and over that red while I go and grab the gray. Now, one of the things about catching your floats that works really nicely with Continental is that you can go under and then over, and then that traps that yarn. So it's a really nice way to trap yarns, which we'll finish with here in a minute. The other method we talked about was one in one hand, one in another hand. And so I've got my gray and red here, and I'm ready to knit with the red. So you can tension it this way and just pick it off. 1, 2, 3, 2, lost a stitch, sorry. 2, 3, 4. And then this is where I have it like this. And so I'm holding them both like that. And this is what I was talking about. Sometimes I tip that needle up so I can get that. And then that's shortening that yarn. So if you're going to do this, it might be best to really bring the yarn around so that you're not making it so tight that you're really throwing with this right hand, okay? So you could do it that way. You can also just do it where you're throwing, or you can leave them. See, I've got to get them untwisted here. Again, that's going to be something that you'll figure out what works and what doesn't work. So now let's just say we're going to pick them up and use them. Let me find it. So now we're going to use the red. So let's say you throw. So you would pick up the red and go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you would pick up the gray. And when I talked about picking up from underneath, there sometimes can be a little bit of a gap. So I want to pick it up so it comes up, the old goes over the new. So then I would pick up my gray and I'd simply knit with the 4 gray like that. And then drop it and pick it up with your red. Now let's see if we put them on opposite sides of the room. So I could leave my red over here, and then I could grab the red and knit with the red. So it comes up from underneath and knits the 4 red stitches. And then I drop that, pick up the gray. But the problem is it needs to come up from underneath. So you've got to transfer those over and work with it that way. That's why you're going to find sitting at a table or a desk or somewhere flat is going to make that easier. Oh, you know what I've been forgetting to do? Been forgetting to stretch out my stitches. So at this point, I'm going to give them a pretty good stretch. They're going to be okay. Looks pretty good. Moving right along. The other thing with the chart that you will notice is that these are offset. So you'll come along and you'll say, first it's 4, then it's 3, then it's 2, then it's 1. So you're going to see that they start a stitch before, they start a stitch before, they start a stitch before. So it allows you to really get the rhythm. Many of our test knitters that knit this said that they didn't, once they got going, they didn't really even look at things because they could tell, you know, if they were off. And that's why we like this. We like this so very much. Okay, we have one other. I'm going to cancel that. Take you guys. Is there any questions that you have, or anything that you've run into with stranded knitting that has been frustrating to you or you might need help with. And we'll leave the video on so that others that are listening to it could hear that. Is there anyone that you can raise your hand and we can call on you if there's somebody that has a specific question about stranded knitting? Okay, Marilyn, go ahead and take yourself off mute.
My question, Angie, is when you start the new yarn color and we have the end, do you knit that in? Or do you just go back and weave it in later?
I do not weave in as I go with this project. Like we've been teaching with our socks. Nope, I just have woven it in as I've gone because there's very few to do. And I just don't want that color showing through on this stranded knitting.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, good question. Who else has a question? Leslie? Just press a little harder.
There we go. Okay. All right. Okay. 2 questions. First of all, I'm a lefty. So right is left, left is right. Okay. I've done charts before, so I know I don't go right to left, I go left to right. Okay. Then second, I don't have the email with the pattern.
We will, I thought that I had you on, but
yeah, I know, but I've kind of went through my emails twice and I haven't found it yet. So
okay, well, we'll do a double check and see if it got open.
Okay.
So
all right.
We'll
That's
look
it.
for it, Leslie. Okay, all right. Anybody else have challenges that you've encountered or concerns or panic that you're having? Okay, Cindy, Paige.
Okay, so when you get to the beginning of the round after your first row, do we have to worry about like doing a jogless thing?
No,
Okay.
no, that's a good question. I see nothing that really, I'm looking for where mine even begin. Here is my beginning.
Okay.
And I don't see any worry about that. Good question.
Okay.
Yeah. This is just going to be real user friendly, definitely. Okay, anybody else? Good questions. Okay, in the email, there is a link because up here, week 3, and when you get week 3 from me, I will be talking about that you're going to need to catch this. You might even need to catch some, I'll know, yeah, we might teach a little bit of that. We'll see. We really tried to design it so you wouldn't have to do too much of that, but there is a little bit of that happens. But up here, there is about 10 stitches in here. And so there's going to need to be a catch. And what those of you that got the email, I put a link to our Christmas stocking because I said to Val, I said, I know I have got this somewhere. And there is a link to that. We will let me see if I can get it pulled up here. Okay. We're going to watch it. It's just 3 minutes. And so that you can be introduced to how to catch the floats. Won't be a thing for this week necessarily, but it will be something that you're going to want to think about.
I'd like to show you an alternative method to trapping your yarn. On this particular round in our Advent sock, there are 17 stitches before we do our red stitch. And so there are really only a few red stitches all the way around. So if you're not tensioning it both in your left hand, you can pick it up and drop, or I tension it in my right hand. And I'll show you how to trap it from this perspective. So now we need to do 17 stitches. So I just wrap it almost like I'm throwing it. So we're going to go 2, 3, and then I'm going to trap. And how I trap on the 4th stitch here is I enter as if I'm knitting. I wrap up and over the inserted needle with the red yarn, the yarn I want to trap. I'm going to come from behind and wrap it just like I were wrapping it for a knit stitch. And then I unwrap the yarn that I'm trapping and I bring it out. Okay, and then we do another stitch and we'll look behind to see how the trap, there it is, it's trapped right there. So let's do it again. So it's 1, 2, this is kind of a combination of continental knitting and throwing knitting. And now I'm ready to trap again. So I'm going to enter as if I'm knitting. I wrap the yarn up and over the back needle, let it set there. I wrap around as if I were going to knit this stitch, and then I unwrap the yarn I'm trapping, bring it out, and you see, he's trapped, but not seen on the front of your work. So that's an alternative. If you're not doing both yarns continental style, you can do them with this method of trapping. I insert up and over the needle, wrap from behind, unwrap, and bring it out, and all the yarn is trapped. Don't forget to give it a slide out to keep things more loose.
This is public on our YouTube channel. And you should be able to find it there.
Going undercover is literally how we solve problems.
Hang on.
If you wake with aches and pains, we recommend the Tempur-Pedic Adapt with innovative technology.
Okay. Figured that out the last time that it went to a different screen. So you don't need to worry about it. There's lots of great tutorials out there on trapping yarn and how to do that. If it's just stressing you out, just blow it off. Don't even worry about it. Just do it. Because again, you're going to be putting this cowl on. It's not like you're going to be getting your rings or fingers or things caught in it. Just do it. It's going to look beautiful. One other thing, when you're thinking about blocking, we highly recommend steam blocking this. All my projects were steam blocked with this. Anytime you use an indie dyer yarn, you run the risk of bleeding. And Jessica does a really, really good job, but we still, every once in a while, will have some whites that become pink. So just make sure to steam your project so that you don't do all this work and then have a pink hat that you didn't want to be pink. And so I simply do not put these yarns in water, and especially when we're dealing with reds and whites and blacks. It's just, when we knit, if you're a Husker fan and you're knitting Husker things, you just have to put up with the fact that red is really difficult to get the dye washed out of, but it looks so good, and it looks so good against white, and it looks so good against black. And one other thing, while I've got you on the line here, we loved our bags, and one of the things about the bag that we questioned was the Velcro at the top. And so we loved the bag so much that we felt like it was worth moving forward, but the Velcro will catch your yarn. So you might want to cut the Velcro out, which most of us have done with our bag, but if you don't, that's okay. It's nice. It keeps it shut, but mine's open anyway, all of the time. But just know that little Velcro could catch on your yarn. So just a word of warning. But we like the bag, so we were willing to live with the Velcro, and we said, we'll pass on that tip for you. Donna, do we have more questions?
No new questions.
Oh my gosh. Great. Well, I'm going to sign off. not going to sign off with you, but I'm going to sign off for our recording. Thank you for tuning in and watching. And for those of you that are on with us live, we'll stay on and knit a little bit, have some conversation, and see how you get along. I think you ought to try to knit a row.